Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have three amazing guests to introduce to you now. Let's get them introduced now. Neil Gyte is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on episode 695 of Boundless Body Radio. Neil Gyte's health journey began at a weight of 260 pounds when he was far from the active and fun father that he wanted to be, and he was clearly on the fast track to an early grave. This moment of clarity gave Neil a sense of determination to change and set him on a journey towards better physical and mental health, largely through ultra-endurance training endeavors. Inspired by this revelation, he has embarked on a new life mission to help 1 billion plus people become metabolically healthy. He and his brother have decided to swim Loch Lomond, 22 miles long with 0 calories. Wow, to raise awareness for mental health, metabolic therapy, and chronic diseases. The purpose of the swim is to determine the metabolic flexibility of our bodies to utilize fat as a fuel source, highlighting the potential of metabolic therapy as a natural lifestyle and nutrition-based approach, which is proving to reverse and prevent many chronic diseases. Neil Gyte, we're not so honored as to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you very much, Casey. Great to be back.
It's great to have you again. I told you last time, and I stayed true to this. I'm not going to start swimming anytime soon. And since our last chat, you did not officially inspire me to start training now. So no swimming.
I think I'll come visit you at some point. I'll get you in the water. We'll figure out a way to resolve that.
If I'm swimming, you should swim. It's not good is going on if that's the case. Our next guest, Dr. Richard Johnson, is a professor of medicine at the University of Colorado and is a clinician, educator, and researcher. He's board certified in internal medicine, infectious diseases, and kidney disease, and is the founding editor of Comprehensive Clinical Nephrology, one of the main textbooks on kidney disease. For more than 20 years, he has led research on the cause of diabetes and obesity, with special interest in the role of sugar, especially fructose, and uric acid. His research has been highly cited, published in top medicine journals, and supported by grants from the National Institutes of Health. He is the author of The Sugar Fix, The Fat Switch, and Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. Dr. Johnson lives in Colorado with his wife, his kids, and 2 rambunctious puppies. I've personally seen several of Dr. Johnson's fantastic presentations at various conferences, including Low Carb Denver and the Collaborative Science Conference in Las Vegas, hosted by Dave Feldman. Dr. Richard Johnson, it is absolutely an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, great to be on this show. And by the way, I'm not planning to swim 22 miles. Neil, that's fantastic. I'm planning to swim maybe 22 feet this afternoon, if I can get down to the pool.
22 of your pull-ups instead, Rick. I know
22 lengths would be, whatever. But yes.
Not going to happen for the two of us. Exactly. Our third guest, Dr. Charles Cavo, is Chief Medical Officer and Pounds Transformation co-founder with his wife, Michelle. As an OBGYN at the Hospital of Central Connecticut, Dr. Cavo became increasingly concerned with how the obesity epidemic was negatively affecting his patients and decided to make finding a solution his life's work. The business was founded to help patients successfully achieve their weight loss and health-related goals through a combination of lifestyle, nutrition, and medical interventions. As a diplomat of the American Board of Obesity Medicine and former OBGYN, he brings his caring nature to treating obesity and obesity-related illnesses using a medically progressive approach. Dr. Cavo is board certified in bariatric medicine and obstetrics and gynecology, and is a fellow of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. He earned his medical degree at Nova Southeastern University School of Osteopathic Medicine and completed his obstetrics and gynecology residency at the University of Connecticut. That introduction had way too many big words. It is such an honor to have you, Dr. Cavo.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. This should be entertaining.
Absolutely. Dude, you just told me off air that you and your wife were involved in the film The Magic Pill. That movie was absolutely transformational for a lot of people out there. That must have been a pretty cool process.
Yeah, that was a really neat process for us. We really didn't see that one coming, and we're really happy that we were able to participate in it. It was a really neat movie to put on the screen.
Awesome. That's so awesome. Yeah, I talk about that little girl in The Magic Pill quite often, who is an absolute disaster. This girl on the worst diet, throwing terrible tantrums. God bless her parents, man. Stuck with it and got her on a better diet and got her mostly ketogenic. And she just calmed right down. It wasn't the easiest transition for sure, but after a few weeks, she was so much more mellow, wasn't throwing food across the room or having tantrums the same way. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, Casey, that's amazing that you remember all that, because that movie's been out for a long time. And like you said, I didn't know it wasn't available now on Netflix. I don't know what happened to it, but yeah, it's impressive that you that it struck a chord with you, because it was a big deal.
Well, for every one of those, there's another 10 that are like blue zones or twin studies or vegan propaganda. So I really appreciated that one coming out and landing on Netflix so that people could watch it. I thought it was quite impressive. Okay, so the three of you are on. I cannot believe what we're going to be talking about today. This still blows my mind. A sugar that is healthy for you. We're coming on to a show to talk about nutrition. We favor carnivore and ketogenic diets and all this stuff. And we're going to be talking about a sugar that can actually be good for you. It still blows my mind. Rick, for you, like you've been studying sugar forever. You do the most amazing talks about fructose in particular. This still has to blow your mind.
Yeah, it's absolutely unexpected. All my life, I've studied how sugars can cause problems. So it is sort of interesting that this is a sugar that actually has metabolic benefits. Yeah, that's why I'm on the show, right? Because of that.
Either that or the sugar industry finally funded you and you got paid over and switched sides. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. And I want to talk about something also that is a bit controversial and a lot of people are familiar with, which is GLP. A lot of people probably recognize the brand name Ozempic. These drugs are getting much more popular. And again, it might sound a little weird that we're tying this in with our discussion today about allulose and the potential health benefits, not even neutral, but health benefits of allulose. But let's start by talking about GLP-1 because this is something, again, it's very trendy. A lot of people are talking about it. I get questions about it all the time. Can you talk a little bit about that, any of you, and how that's related to what we're going to be talking about today with allulose?
Sure. I guess I could start off. So it was discovered some years ago that there is this hormone that we really didn't even know about that's produced in the gut and that has effects to lower blood glucose. And it stimulates insulin and it lowers blood glucose. And so people started making it. Actually, there was a variant that was a toxin from the Gila monster, actually, that they discovered that it had a substance that could prolong the effect of this hormone. And people started making drugs based on these to treat diabetes. And Novo Nordisk had one of these drugs. And at some point, they started realizing that there was a little bit of weight loss. And they started experimenting. They found that when they gave higher and higher doses, that they could actually get very profound weight loss. And when this was first brought to my attention some years ago, I thought, we were all kind of very, very intrigued about it. But we weren't sure how safe it would be, if it would cause low blood glucose levels, or if it would cause significant side effects. But what's happened is it's launched a whole new industry, and there's just Eli Lilly is going to become $1 trillion a year company at some point, based upon these drugs. And these drugs are injections, and when you get it, it seems to curb appetite. It reduces your appetite, and it has a lot of other effects as well on the brain and other places, and people start losing weight. So, it sounds kind of like a magic drug, and in some respects it is, but it comes with a cost. And the first thing is that it does cost. It's actually fairly expensive, and a lot of people can't afford it. And their prices are coming down for sure, but it's expensive. Another problem is that at high doses, it does cause side effects. And one of the side effects is that it causes abdominal discomfort because it slows the gut and slows the stomach and prevents it from emptying. That's partially how it works. And when that happens, you get gassy and burp and all kinds of things. Some get diarrhea. So it's associated with some side effects, and they can be significant. Maybe 1 in 5 people, 1 in 6 people can't tolerate it. And then others will stop it either because of the costs or side effects. So these are some of the main issues with it. It's expensive. And then the biggest one is that as soon as you stop it, the weight comes back. And so, in almost everybody. So it becomes a very useful and helpful thing if you have really serious obesity. And now people who can afford it, if they want to kind of get rid of the little extra weight, they can do so by taking it, but it's costly, side effects, and all these things. And so it brings a lot of good things in general, because it's also been associated with, now it's being seen that it's reducing complications like cardiovascular events and heart attacks, and it's having benefits on a variety of conditions. There's even reports that it might help reduce dementia, the risk for dementia. And so all these kinds of things make it very exciting. And now there's an attempt to make oral forms of the drug, and I think the drug is here, and it's going to be used more in the next few years, but it's not the perfect solution because of all the things I mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Charles has a tremendous experience with these drugs, and maybe he should say something more, knowledgeable than I am.
I can't add much to what you just said, Rick, but I think, Casey, I'd be interested in knowing, like, to make maybe some of the comments I might make about it, maybe address some of the more popular questions that you've heard your listeners maybe, put out to you, and then maybe we can knock out some of those questions that get presented to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I guess I was just going to ask, this could be for anybody, but if somebody really wanted to take it and you found that this could definitely help, I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater of this drug. I've heard it can help with a lot of things. What other things would you want that person to be doing and be mindful of? Like, it's not just take this pill. What other lifestyle things would you really like to see that person take on?
Yeah, so those are that's a great question. And that's actually sometimes a requirement by insurance companies that they're going to cover that medicine. They want to know that patients have been involved in some sort of professional weight sort of maintenance program that deals with behaviours and that sort of thing. They may have wanted the patients to already try some of the lesser expensive drugs that might not be as effective. And I would definitely say that in order to see a dramatic improvement and sustainable results from the GLP agonists, the medications like Ozempic, it really makes a whole lot of sense to use them in combination with a legitimate sort of metabolic center that knows the ins and outs of not just the medications, but also understands the supplements and the behavioral changes, as well as food and nutrition and lifestyle that goes around it. When you package that all together, you have a much higher likelihood of not only losing a lot more weight, but also sustaining the weight loss.
I really appreciate that. That's great. My mind would go to, making sure this person's getting a decent amount of protein. We're mitigating the potential loss of lean mass. Strength training, I would think, would be a kind of higher priority. Are you finding that patients are willing to do some of those things as well when they take this medication?
They usually have already been doing that a lot of times. Sometimes when you put them on the medications, they start to feel kind of washed out, fatigued, the nausea and that sort of thing can sometimes decrease the wind in their sails with regards to wanting to stay active and that sort of thing. So in a lot of patients, you kind of have to thread the needle between what's the right dose and what's the right activity, because patients do run the risk of losing lean body mass or losing muscle when they go on this if they're not active and having adequate amounts of protein. And so the follow-up on these people with not just a scale, but a body composition machine makes all the difference in the world, I think, to safe utilization of the medication.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. When people reduce, go ahead, Neil. I was just going to say when people.
I'll go first then. I was just going to add, I think one of the really important things is the way these GLP-1 drugs work is they effectively dial the GLP hormone up to a super physiological kind of 11 out of 10 scale 24/7. I think, as Charlie and Rick have alluded, because of that, your body's metabolism is not operating how it normally does and fluctuates. So I do think a lot of the side effects that Charlie mentioned, it's all very well to say, eat protein, go and do strength training at the gym. But I think the reality is, when your body isn't operating in its normal way, it can be a little bit more challenging to do that. And one of the other big side effects I was just going to make sure that we call out is, 30 to 50% of the weight loss can be muscle tissue, which is very difficult to put back on. So actually, and a lot of the weight that the studies have showed people put back on then is not muscle tissue. So you can actually end up being metabolically less healthy, even at a lower weight, because you've lost a significant amount of muscle. So I think that's a really important part of the jigsaw to understand. So yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'm just gonna follow up on that by just saying, that when you kind of reduce your appetite from these medications, these medicines will decrease your appetite, and you get these GI side effects, So there's this tendency to go to comfort food, right? And comfort food is often bad foods like carbs and chips and things like this. So what happens is some people, unless they're educated about it, will tend to reduce healthy foods and go to these kind of comfort foods when they're not feeling that good from the side effects. And so then when you're losing weight, you're losing fat and protein, and you're losing everything. When you lose weight, you're losing a little bit of all. So if you're replacing your nutrition by a poor diet, that's where the equation comes in, where you really get into trouble. And that's why seeing people like Charles, who does the body composition and educates people about diet, is so important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Charles, if you could tell us what has your experience been with the medication, and then we can maybe start to see if there's other natural ways that we can enhance this inside our own bodies innately.
Yep, sure. So exactly what Rick said, there's certainly are a lot of patients that would describe the side effects to being akin to feeling seasick. And when people are feeling kind of seasick, they reach for crackers or they go for something that just settles their stomach. And that ends up being really not a great place to be in when you're trying to lose weight in a healthy way. But when you start these medications, and they are really useful tools. I mean, it's been a really exciting new sort of angle for us to take on managing metabolic dysfunction that leads to abnormal weight gain with these medications when they're used appropriately, because they're really effective. But we start at a really low dose, and then over the course of every 4 weeks, we'll titrate it up. If a person starts to feel any of the side effects that are really not, they really pose a risk with regards to sustainable sort of planning, we'll bring them back down to a dose where they didn't have any symptoms. And then we'll leave them there for a while until they get to a space where they're happy with their weight and we're happy with their progress. And then we can start backing them off. I think a lot of people think that the medications are forever, and that I haven't found necessarily be the case. There certainly are people that need to have them pulsed at times once we start to reduce them and stop them based on what we see on the body composition. But we definitely can kind of bring a person off of the medication successfully and make sure their weight loss is maintained. So it's not a forever drug by any means. As far as the patients that we've seen that have been using it successfully, we have just because my background's OBGYN, we probably see about 85, 90% women in the clinic, and perimenopausal and menopausal women, they do very well on the medications, but that's also the crew that is really at higher risk for osteopenia, osteoporosis with weight reduction. And so they have to be really closely monitored, I think, with regards to skeletal muscle mass. And then the reproductive age women that are using birth control pills, these medications can actually interfere with the effectiveness of these pills. And so that crew also needs to be pretty closely monitored with regards to GI effect to make sure that they're still absorbing the right amount of pills so they can prevent pregnancy. But by far and away, I think the medications have been a useful adjunct to everything we know anyways. And as long as a person doesn't have contraindications, we'll use them pretty regularly.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny you say that about lifetime drug, because you hear that all the time. I hear it all the time. You start, they're trying to push for 6-year-olds to get it and it's lifetime. But I do hear more anecdote that people can be stepped off of it and done safely and maintain weight loss. So I find that to be really interesting. It's cool that you've noticed that in practice.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's like everybody has a different desire to want to have a treatment of some sort. We'll see patients, they were told they need bariatric surgery. They don't want bariatric surgery. So they come see us and they want medications. We got plenty of patients that come see us, they don't want a medication, they want a supplement, or they want an answer, they want nutrition. So I mean, the treatment or management strategy really just has to be dialed into the individual that's in front of you. And then you can kind of take it from there. So it's not a drug that's necessarily for everybody, just like surgery is not for everybody. It's got to be sort of teased out as to what's right for the person.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I was just going to add also, and I think a lot of the research out there recently shows that the majority of the population don't want to be on these drugs long term, and ultimately the drugs don't fix the root cause of the metabolic dysfunction which is driving the obesity. So I think that's one of the things that I love about the work that Charlie and Michelle and the clinic have been doing for the last 5 years is, and Charlie, probably 95+%, I don't know the percentage, but of the people in Charlie's clinic, you're treating them largely with a natural GLP weight loss program, because this can be done naturally without any of the side effects. It's just, I think Charlie can probably speak to this much more articulate than me, that it maybe takes a little bit longer, but you're working on the fundamental changes of the nutrition, the movement, to actually fix the metabolic dysfunction. And I think those people will be much more successful in the long term. And those same techniques can also be used, as Charlie said, to titrate people off GLP-1 medication. So I think that's ultimately how do we give agency and the tools and the power to make people be able to do this naturally, or if you use the drugs, use them for a short period, but always have a plan to ramp off, because the consumer research shows that people don't want to be on them forever, and they would rather have a natural solution.
So that's a perfect segue, Neil, I think, into my introduction to Allulose a while ago. Was interesting, but then it was really sort of solidified from everything Rick has to say about Allulose. So Rick, you can go ahead and give everybody the science behind it. And then what he has to say is exactly like where a scientific mind sort of can get picked up by a clinician. And then you can really leverage what has been shared as far as the science is concerned. So I think that's a good place for Rick to kind of pick up the piece, tell the story about those.
Okay, so thank you for your kind words. So there's no doubt that table sugar and high fructose corn syrup are playing a role in the obesity epidemics, and I have spent my career studying how table sugar, sucrose, and high fructose corn syrup really can induce obesity in animals and diabetes and the whole thing. And that, for a long time, it was thought that sugar was an empty calorie, meaning that it was a calorie, but it wasn't really bad. It just wasn't good. But actually, the data really shows that sugar is actively makes a person hungry, induces this change in our hormones called leptin resistance, where you end up eating more than you should. It stimulates fat production. It stimulates insulin resistance. It does all these bad things, and we're eating, and on average, about 15% of our diets come from these sugars. And in adolescents and young adults, maybe 20% of the diet can be from these sugars. And so I've written books about how sugar, and particularly this component fructose, is driving these metabolic disease epidemic, and is driving obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease, and even things like Alzheimer's disease. And the data is extremely strong. So that would make you think that sugars are some things to avoid. Now, lactose, which is a sugar in milk, actually does not have any bad aspects to it, but it doesn't really taste sweet. So it's a sugar, but it's not really what we would consider like something to sweeten a food. But there is a natural rare sugar, and it's present in figs and different kinds of foods, but in very, very small amounts. And it's called allulose. And what's funny about it is it looks like fructose chemically. It's almost identical, except that one little hydroxyl group, one little bit of the chemistry, it just flipped. And because of that, it's called an epimer, and it looks like fructose, And it's sweet, not as sweet as fructose, but it is sweet. But for some reason, it doesn't trigger this switch that turns on this obesity metabolic syndrome. And we did studies in animals. We really showed that this is a sugar that does not trigger this obesity switch. So I became interested in it. And I was approached by a guy named Steve Hanley, who has a company where they're making allulose sugar products here in the US, and like candy bars and stuff. And I was very skeptical when he approached me, but in my books, I knew that that this sugar was different. And so he asked me if I would be the chief science officer in his company, and I said, well, listen, I'll come in, but my goal is to figure out, is it good, bad, indifferent, but the evidence suggested that it might be good. And so because of that, I thought, well, if there's actually a healthy sugar out there, I want to know. And so I joined the company about a year ago. And what we started doing was started looking at all the articles and papers, and then we started doing studies ourselves. And we found that allulose actually lowers blood sugar, not raises it. So blood sugar is glucose, right? And a high glucose means diabetes. If your glucose is chronically high, that's diabetes. And if your glucose is really low, that's called hypoglycemia. And you don't want to be in either of those situations, right? You want to have a normal glucose. And a normal glucose is really a great goal because it helps keep everything running correctly. And even swings of high glucoses after meals can be a problem. And one of the big problems with carbs is that carbs contain starch and sugar, and these can raise the blood glucose levels. And there's evidence that is precedes the development of diabetes and all these terrible conditions. So having a normal blood glucose is really important. And what we found was that allulose, when you give it to a person, it blocks that rise in blood sugar. It blocks that rise in blood sugar that occurs with pancakes or foods that have a lot of carbs in them. And it can help the diabetic. We found evidence that it can really help the diabetic. So right away, we knew there was this big benefit, especially for people who are insulin resistant and tend to have high glucose levels. And you do this with a chocolate bar. But then there was these reports that it might actually stimulate GLP-1, like in a natural product that could stimulate GLP-1. And the papers that we looked at, it was pretty impressive. It was like 5-fold more than other foods. It was like it stood out as a particular thing. And then when we found that there were studies in people showing that if you give allulose, you tend to reduce weight gain or even cause weight loss compared to controls. And so it seems to have some benefits on weight, maybe not like the magic, Ozempic, which is 100-fold higher levels, but real benefit. And so we started doing our own studies, and we found that we could show that allulose could stimulate the release of GLP-1 from cultured cells from the human intestine. And so we now think that it has some benefits that are very, very similar to how GLP-1 drugs work. And so what's happened is we're beginning to use them as supplements in weight loss clinics like Charles is doing, and he's seen benefits. Now, I'm a scientist, and I want to prove it with a clinical trial. When we haven't done that big clinical trial yet, but the trials that have been published have shown a benefit on weight for sure, even with low doses of this sugar. So I'm I'm a believer, but I'm also, now affiliated with this company. So that's my disclosure. But anyway, I'm going to pass this to Charles and Neil, and Charles can talk a little bit about his experience in the clinic with people actively taking chocolate allulose bars, to help them lose weight. Okay.
It does seem like cheating to people,
It
right?
does seem like cheating. It does seem like cheating.
They look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them I'm going to prescribe them some sugar, and they're like,
yeah, exactly. It just sounds too good to be true.
Yeah. And we hear that all the time. I mean, but there are a couple of things just to go back on. One is how prevalent sugar is in the diet, and people don't even realize it. Most of my patients will come in and they'll say they're eating a really clean diet. They don't really have sugar at all. And because when I tell them they need to take sugar, they're like, I don't even take sugar now. Like, what do you want? How am I going to put this into anything? I don't put sugar in anything. But there's sugar in all the fruit juices, all these like energy drinks that people, I mean, they don't even see it coming. And
yogurt.
Yeah.
Fruit yogurt often they add lots of sugar to it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Their new protein bars are coming out that say 20 grams of protein, but if you look on the back of them, it's like 50 grams of carbohydrates. I mean,
sugar.
So it's crazy what's out there. So in any case, you have to get them over the hump that they actually do eat sugar, because they don't think they do. And so once they acknowledge the fact that, yeah, there's sugar in their diet, and I'm going to change their sugar to a type of sugar that actually improves their metabolic health, then you have, more head scratching that goes on. But what Rick has noticed in the science literature and what he's seen in the testing that they're doing, we see it in our patient population. If I put a continuous glucose monitor on a patient and prescribe them RX sugar bars or 10, 20 grams of allulose every 6 to 8 hours, every time they take that dose, you can see the continuous glucose monitor take a dip in their glucose. And to me, that's important. But what's even more important is what I have to assume is happening behind the scene of the glucose drop, which is an insulin drop. Because I think insulin is probably, even more sinister than glucose is, and we don't talk about it enough because we can't measure it as readily. But nevertheless, I think that drop that you see in a person's glucose after they ingest allulose, because it increases their GLP, is something that I wish so many more people would start to recognize as being an actual phenomenon, because it would solve so many chronic health conditions if people would just pick this information up and run with it.
Right. Neil.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of this is the reason why I joined RX Sugar. So after 20 years in tech, 12 at Google, the impact of chronic disease on family and loved ones made me dig deep into the root causes of these chronic diseases. And when I realized that mitochondrial health and metabolic health was the root cause, I set myself a new mission to try and help 1 billion plus people become metabolically healthy. And I think Charlie and Rick have just summarized why I decided to join RX Sugar, because if you look at the pie chart of metabolic health, food is the biggest part of the problem, which has underserved solutions. And as I dug deep into the science behind allulose, similarly, I heard Rick, Dom D'Agostino, Ben Bickman, all these legends of metabolic health on stage talking about this rare sugar allulose, but I had to go and test it for myself, because I thought there must be some catch. There's got to be something, to do with this. But the more I dug into the research, and I proved on myself with a CGM and, blood glucose keto meters, that it does decrease blood sugar. And whilst it also increases GLP-1, Charlie can speak to this as well. The experience that pretty much the majority of people have when they have even just one of the RX Sugar chocolate bars or the new keto brownie mix, or even allulose on its own, you do get a feeling of satiety. It helps because you're getting that bump in GLP-1. On top of that, it also helps with lipid metabolism. So it decreases the generation of new fat, and it can increase, effectively burning the fat that you do have. And it also has antioxidation and kind of effects on positive effects on inflammation. So you have all of this wrapped in a almost 0-calorie rare sugar. And I simply looked at how do I help 1 billion people, become metabolically healthy. And I think our mission at RX Sugar is to solve for sugar. And so we want to replace the $120 billion sugar and sweetener industry with allulose. And I think if we did that, if it was prevalent in the food supply, then I think, as both Rick and Charlie mentioned, the incidences of chronic disease would be significantly lower. And so for all of those reasons, I decided to join the company, because more people need to know that there is this, the allulose is something that people can add and use to help them reset their relationship with sugar, with fructose, but also carbohydrates. So again, Rick has done huge amounts of work in the pathway, in this fructose pathway in the body that excess carbohydrates trigger, causes your body to create its own fructose internally. And it does that as part of the survival switch mechanism, which in times of food certainty was a survival mechanism, because we might not eat for 2, 3, 4 weeks. But in current modern day, that's not the case. So this survival switch is being triggered. And there's very few people, a lot more people need to know about these mechanisms, because if you really focus on the root cause and provide people practical tools and information and products to help them, then people can heal themselves more naturally. And that's really what we need. When you look at 93% of Americans being metabolically healthy, you look at $4.3 trillion spent on healthcare, and 90% of those are on chronic diseases, which are driven by metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah. As a doctor, I have to say that although I prescribe medicines all the time, it sure would be nicer if we didn't have to prescribe medicines and people could heal themselves natural ways, for sure.
Wow. Well, Rick, I mean, this isn't your first rodeo. You've been around the block quite a bit, and you've been researching this for so many years. I've loved your work. And you've seen all the new sweeteners or sugar, substitutes come out. It's aspartame. And then later on, it was, like stevia. Stevia was supposed to be so much better for you. That didn't really pan out. And then monk fruit. And we get all these different like sweeteners. And so I think about things like the cephalic phase of insulin release, where I taste something or I smell a Cinnabon, like Gary Taubes writes about, and I'm already secreting insulin. So to hear that allulose does the opposite to insulin, especially, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Yeah, well, I have studied a lot of these low-calorie sugars in the laboratory, and I've can tell you that the first thing is that almost all the low-calorie sugars are better than sugar. So if you had to choose between a Diet Coke and a Coke, always pick the Diet Coke, always. Because sugar really is like a hammer that turns on this process that's really horrible, right? Gaining weight, insulin resistance, not good for the brain, et cetera, et cetera. So when the low-calorie sugars come out, they're definitely better than full-calorie sugar, than real sugar, okay? But low-calorie sugars aren't the great answer for most of them, because although they may be not cause obesity, some of them can cause insulin resistance. Some of them have a lot of other issues, like aspartame may have effects on cognitive function, for example, and some of them can be associated with saccharins, associated with bladder tumors. And I mean, it's not, some of these low-calorie sugars are not the answer. And they're either neutral or negative. But what's interesting about allulose is, first, it's a natural sugar. And secondly, it actually is not neutral. It's beneficial, in terms of effects on blood glucose, fat oxidation, and all these different things. And so it is a different beast. And so, this is the big difference. There are issues, allulose, maybe not everyone may like it. It's not quite as sweet as regular sugar. And so it's not going to taste like the Swiss chocolate, with the rich Swiss, the best chocolates in the world kind of thing. But it doesn't have the poison that those sweets have, because they contain this high, sugar that really can do things. These are sweet. They're quite tasty. Some people absolutely love them, and others say, well, they're not really exactly as sweet as I want, or, if you eat a large amount of chocolates with allulose, you might get some, GLP-1 effects may affect you. You may get a little bloating and so forth, or you might even get a little diarrhea, just like Ozempic can. So they're not like completely side effect free. If you eat a lot of them, you might, end up going to the bathroom a little more. So, but when you eat just like 1 or 2 bars, the side effects are almost minimal. I mean, I think they are minimal. And I think most people will tell you that things like these chocolate candy bars that have like allulose in them really do not cause side effects. But maybe Charles, you've been using it quite a bit. Do you see any significant side effects from these chocolates?
No, I mean, we use RX sugar in our practice. That's what we've been doing for a while. And we'll use GLP natural diets for many of our patients. We're going to be doing a GLP challenge for a big Facebook group coming up in September. And we don't really hesitate at all when it comes to our recommendations of giving allulose in the amount of 20 to 30 grams, at a time. And sure, there's some people that are going to be sensitive, just like they're going to be sensitive to eating an egg or anything else. And but by far and away, the majority of people tolerate RX sugar and allulose without any problems at all.
Yeah.
I was just going to add and maybe tie this back to the point that you raised, Casey, which was just back to the, it seems too good to be true. I think one of the amazing things that helps in this advent really is the technology of things like, Keto Mojo devices or continuous glucose monitors, certainly through Levels, through others, and Abbott's new over-the-counter device just came out. And that's where you can see this in itself. So we actually at Hack Your Health in Austin a few months ago, we did a canned chocolate lower your blood sugar challenge. So people would come up to our booth at this, kind of pretty big biohacking conference. They would go to the Keto Mojo stand. They would test their blood glucose, their ketones. They would take one of the RX sugar chocolate bars, and then they would go back 30 minutes later and test their blood glucose and ketone levels. And when you do that and you see the impact on yourself, that's when the magic starts to land, that you can actually have something to satisfy that sweet craving. You can get the benefit in blood sugar. And then on top of that, the overwhelming feedback we get is, I actually have one of these bars, which is just 80 calories specifically formulated for blood sugar control and satiety. And after having one, there's no need to eat 2, 3, and 4, because you have that nice sweet taste, you have the chocolate. And a lot of people say that they don't feel the need to have any more. And then when you look at all of the other science and research, and we'll share all of the clinical studies that Rick and Charlie have sort of referenced around, its impact on blood sugar, its impact on weight loss. A lot of this has been proven in clinical trials. You put the 2 and 2 together, you start to see actually that there's you can see the impact on yourself. Or if you just go to YouTube and you search allulose and impact on blood sugar, there's hundreds of videos of people, testing themselves with allulose. And I think once you put those 2 things together, it starts to become, wow, this is real.
There really is no food that I know of that lowers blood sugar like this does. And so if you're one of those people who get those big blood sugar rises following a meal, and there are a lot of people out there that do, the first step is reduce the carbs. See if you can do it naturally without anything. Just try to reduce your carbs and see if you can control the blood sugar. But a lot of people, even with all those things, they'll be insulin resistant and their blood sugar will go up. And we know that's not good. Something like allulose, chocolate allulose bar can help reduce that rise quite significantly. It's like, it is amazing. So there is a metabolic benefit that is extremely easy to demonstrate in individuals with insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, even diabetes. And so this is the great thing about this.
So maybe actually, Charlie, because I know you've had significant experience of patients coming into your clinic who are highly insulin resistant. They have very high, even fasting blood glucose levels. Maybe you could talk through some of the ways that you use allulose, within your practice.
And before you do that, unfortunately I have to leave for another appointment. But thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you, Casey, for inviting me, and I'll let you continue. It is an exciting area of nutrition.
Thank you so very much for coming on the show. It's an honor to host you.
And wonderful seeing you, the others too. Take care. Yep. Bye.
Bye. So
now that he's gone.
Yeah, now he's gone. Yeah, so my experience in the clinic using uric sugar, obviously anybody that has sugar cravings or is missing a chocolate bar or something like that, it's a pretty easy target to hit with those people. We really try to undersell the sweetness and the taste of it. Otherwise, people, I think, get too excited and hyped up that this is going to be just like, a Reese's peanut butter cup or something like that. And it's not. Allulose isn't as sweet as sugar is, but if you manage a person's expectations, they seem very satisfied with it when it comes to the people just looking for a taste. When it comes to looking for a treatment, and taste isn't really all that important, and they don't want the medications and they don't want surgery, this is, to me, it's like a supplement. And you might not like taking a needle in your stomach, and you might not like the taste of, sugar in your mouth. I don't know, but it sure makes an easy argument to say, take this and put it in your mouth, this allulose. It doesn't hurt like the needle does. The side effects aren't nearly as bad, and the effects are very similar, not as magnified, but they're very, very similar. So when we see patients that have elevated insulins first thing in the morning, and our goal is to get their insulin level down, they'll start the day with 20 grams of Rx sugar. Or we'll try to get them to start the day with 20 grams of Rx sugar, because that right there brings blood sugar down, and we know it brings insulin levels down, and it starts to control their appetite. So it allows them to go through the morning prioritizing protein before they go and feel a kind of blood sugar crash of any sort. So we'll use that trick all day long, as there's not any side effects that they're experiencing. Generally speaking, the effects of allulose, since it does release some GLP, that GLP stays elevated probably for 4 to 6 hours, I'm guessing. It depends on a person's rate of disposal. And then they've got to dose up again. It's similar to, I think, Ozempic, where they too get that rise of GLP. It's just the enzyme that breaks down the GLP doesn't act on the drug the way it does on the natural GLP production of the allulose. So you have to continue to dose that to get the effect. It's especially useful, I find, Neil, in the later afternoon or evening when people come home and they just want that sort of like sweet something, and they're a little bit snacky, and they'll go for that healthy yogurt or granola bar or something like that, right? And you can knock that portion out of their habits by giving them the allulose, or at least you can dampen and blunt the effects of those foods. If they front load 20 grams of allulose, you just don't see the excursion of the glucose to go so high.
Interesting. Okay, so I started working with nutrition coaching about a decade ago. I got certified in carnivore nutrition coaching during the pandemic. And I realized that the people that were seeking me out, there's probably some selection bias, because you wouldn't want to do a strict, carnivore diet if you didn't have this. But I realized that a lot of the people who were coming to me that wanted to try a very low carbohydrate or no carbohydrate diet, they were similar to me, food addicts, like sugar addict. I have a really hard time stopping myself when I indulge. So I find it just a lot easier to never indulge. And so my first instinct is to think like if people identify as sugar addicts and maybe they've worked really hard to get sugar out of their diets, does, in your experience, Charles, does giving them the allulose re-trigger that kind of food addiction behavior? Because I mean, you guys work with metabolic health. Surely you have a lot of people that probably identify as food addicts or sugar addicts as well. What has been your experience with that?
There's always going to be some outliers that it's going to trigger. But I would say that is very far and few in between. It just has a these snacks, they just have a shut off mechanism of their own. You have two and you just don't want to have many more. It doesn't give you the same sort of neurotransmitter sort of, aha, this is great, I got to keep on doing it. You feel very filled up very fast. You probably have some stretch receptors, sort of appetite regulation that goes on. And so you just can't go crazy on the portions. And I haven't really noticed that it triggers people to say, oh, there's that hit of sugar, I'm going to go get the other type of sugar now instead of this one. Occasionally that happens, but we see people in our clinic frequently enough that if we notice that trend is going on, we can shut it down pretty quickly. But for people that don't have, like maybe us or somebody that's familiar with that in their corner, they might want to just, do some food journaling and see if they notice an uptick in their carbohydrate count over the course of 4 weeks when they introduce allulose. And if they do, they might be running into one of those kind of problems.
Gotcha. But like you said, like few and far between. Go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to say, so I'll send you through a link to a paper, Casey, that you can add in, which actually looks at the impact of the different sugars on the taste receptors, TASR, I think 1, 2, and 3. And effectively, the sweeter they are, the more they impact those receptors. And that does drive the fructose pathway in the body, which is why, sugar and fructose specifically is tapping into that survival mechanism. And so the outcome of this paper is allulose is effectively ranked the lowest. If you stack rank all of these, you obviously have, kind of fructose at the top. And so therefore we believe it's not triggering that kind of same pathway in the body, which is why I think Charlie can probably attest to this, is people generally then do have allulose, but you don't feel the need to eat more and more and more of it because it's actually not triggering off that pathway within the body. So from that perspective, I do think it's different. Obviously, there's the emotional side of the relationship with food, which is something that, you do have to work on. But a lot of the science is really showing that it's impacting different taste receptors and therefore, it's triggering off different positive pathways in the body rather than negative ones.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate both of your perspectives on that note. As much as I love the carnivore diet and I love my clients to do it and people seek me out, like the reality of what it's like out there to do carnivore, it's not that easy. Like not that many people really do it. And we hear amazing success stories. And again, I love it. And I want to help people in that direction if that's something they want. But at the end of the day, I think conversations like this are so important because all of us are trying to do the best for our clients in the real world, and it's not great out there, right? Like you were mentioning earlier, Charles, about all the sugar everywhere. Like our diets are terrible. To have any type of workaround that can also be beneficial for certain people, I think is so important. So I think that response of like, you really need to know yourself, food journal, that kind of thing, really pay attention to see whether this is causing, triggering behaviors of some kind. You can recognize that, but it's cool to know that it does have that satiating effect. Therefore, it is really difficult to over consume. And yeah, I would have thought that if it would have re-triggered a lot of people into food addiction or sugar addiction, you would have seen it by now.
Yeah, I agree. I just, it's something that is in the back of our mind when we, are talking to somebody that's clearly a food addict or a sugar addict. But again, we follow people up pretty frequently so that we can sort of address those concerns as they come along. Yeah.
I think that's also part, I would say to relate back to some of the benefits, which is one of the ways I think allulose is a really great tool, is to help provide that bridge, because once you can, I would say, break that kind of fructose carbohydrate pathway in the body, and the body realizes that actually, especially people trying to lose weight, there is a significant amount of fat in the body, that if you can then tap the body to be able to use fat as a fuel source, then the body starts to realize that, oh, there's this other pathway that I can actually generate kind of energy, which is probably back to the carnivore diet. And historically, our, fat and ketones as a fuel source are probably our predominant way that we've spent most of our kind of, biological history. And so I think there's a really important bridge tool that it provides to help in that regard. And then once you kind of have that pathway and metabolism reset, then the body is, you're kind of just resetting it back to its normal homeostasis.
Very interesting and well explained. Neil, you're probably best to ask this question too. Tell us about some of the products you guys offer. Is this stuff that people can make at home? I know the bars you guys sell, and we've referenced that quite a bit, but what kind of products are you making, and how are you looking to expand that over time?
Yeah, great question. So RX Sugar is a health and wellness company disguised as a food company. So we really take the science, working with Rick, with Charlie, with a bunch of others, esteemed metabolic health specialists on our science board, to create minimalist natural products. So we have our just pure allulose, which is both sugar and liquid that you can use in baking, you can use in coffee. It is a fully functional sugar. So from that perspective, you really can replace pretty much any recipe, allulose instead of sugar or any of the other sweeteners. So that's, I would say, kind of the core. We then have a range of flavored syrups, so caramel, vanilla, pancake syrup. Again, these are great for baking. You can also, they're great for coffees and many other things. We then have these swelthy sticks, which are a little bit like allulose flavored pixie sticks. So they just come in little packets, and you can I use them out and about if I'm going to eat out at a restaurant as a kind of an insurance policy to mitigate any blood sugar spike of what might be in the food at a restaurant. You never really know. So they're really useful. Kids absolutely love them if you just want that kind of little bit of a sweetness with some flavor. And then we have the chocolate bars, our swelthy snacks, sweet and healthy snacks. So they are, again, very minimal, 5 ingredients: caramel, chocolate, mint brownie, and vanilla, specifically designed for blood sugar control and satiety. And then we just a few months ago launched our keto brownie mix, which is an amazing, literally just add some water, 45 seconds in the microwave, and you have a beautiful keto brownie, which has 0 traditional sugar, obviously just has allulose added, and I think it's about 6 or 7, very natural, perfectly plain ingredients in there. So that really is our current range of products. We've got many plans to produce other products ourselves, and really we want our own products to be, kind of the gold standard in blood sugar control and satiety. But we're also partnering with many other food companies to partner to have allulose, embedded in other products as well, because from our perspective, back to the conversation we had earlier, it's really important that the whole kind of food supply chain, if allulose was in more foods to help minimize the glycemic control and start to give some of the great metabolic benefits that allulose has proven to be in, then the more places it can appear within the food supply and chain, the better. So we're also partnering on that front as well, and open to collaborate with anybody who's interested in metabolic health. So would love anybody listening to reach out to us. We love partnerships.
Wow. Well, I've done a lot of surprising podcast episodes in this journey, and talking about a healthy sugar is not one that I ever thought I would do. So this is very surprising. I love both of your insights. Gentlemen, do we have any other closing remarks that we want to end on, or something we've missed at this point?
For me, no, I think we hit all of the really important facts. Hopefully people listen to the podcast and get curious about taking a look at allulose as an opportunity to improve their diet and give themselves a little bit more variety. RX Sugar has been a fantastic brand, and our patients truly love it.
Neil, how about you?
Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I think for me, the really important thing is, for people to take a step back, and I see allulose and then RX Sugar products really as a helpful tool to help you get over the most difficult stage, which is resetting that relationship with the fructose pathway in the body. So kind of have this analogy that, you know, changing your diet away from that is like going to the gym and just trying to do pull-ups just straight away, right? It's really difficult to do pull-ups straight away. You have to put in a lot of training. I see allulose as a little bit like the weighted pull-up assist. So you start kind of, you know, adding some weight with you. So you start to engage the right muscles and you start to be able to do pull-ups. And then over time, you can just, you know, reduce the weight down as you get stronger. And so I really do think that it provides that very kind of instant help for people to be able to switch and get their metabolism to switch away from the sugar fructose pathway into, you know, much more of the fat burning pathway. And the crazy thing is it is through this natural rare sugar that looks and tastes like sugar, and through these chocolate bars that that do taste delicious. And when I first tasted them before I joined the company, I thought they would have, you know, a bit more of, you know, a lot of the keto products out there have kind of, you know, the chemical taste and so forth, and RX sugar products really don't. They really taste, you know, delicious natural chocolate bars because they're formulated that way. So maybe that's another good metaphor to kind of help people. It really is there as a tool to ease in the transition, and then you know, beyond that, if you know, we all get the craving for something sweet. It's kind of in our DNA as humans, having saved us as a species. Then you know that you can turn to something which isn't going to trigger that pathway, is going to help with your metabolic health, not hinder. So just for all those perspectives, I think the more knowledge out there, and there's a lot more, you know, science and videos, a lot more people talking about allulose out there, which is amazing, because all we want as a company is to help people into metabolic health. And so the more people, I think, that have this knowledge, that go and do their own research and look at the papers that will obviously link to put in the show notes and so forth, and people can start to take a little bit more of their health back into their own hands, but also do so with practical products that really help them do that. So because it can be tough to reset your relationship with sugar. Like I did this as part of my journey, probably 8 years ago, and that was really difficult, for me to do, and it's difficult for anyone to do. So any products that help make that easier, I think the world needs more of those.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I've got my own dietary preferences, but not everybody can do it. And the more of these things that we have out there, the better. So I really appreciate all of your work. I really appreciate you coming onto the show to educate us about this. I think this is a really cool, viable option. Love the work you guys do. Let's go in kind of the same order that we did in the beginning. Neil, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So people, LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. So we just search for Neil Gyte on LinkedIn. That's where you can find out about me. Obviously, for RX Sugar products, if you go to rxsugar.com, you can have a look at all the products. You can buy everything direct online. We also sell through Amazon, through iHerb, and we're in about 20,000 stores across the US. So you can also look on the website. There's the store locator. You can type in your zip code and see where you can find RX Sugar products. So yeah, that's the best places to find me and RX Sugar. Charlie?
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm in so probably LinkedIn also, just Charles Cavo, Cavo. And as far as website, it's poundstransformation.com, all one word, would be the medical practice. And we have dietitians that do their stuff on TikTok. So if you Google or if you search TikTok for Pounds Transformation, Instagram or Facebook, you'd see them doing a lot of cooking with allulose.
Excellent. Well, that's great. And we also had Dr. Richard Johnson. We're not going to ask him because he's already left, but I was able to find his information pretty easy. I think it was just his website. I think it's Dr. Richard Johnson. Google it. Google his books. His books are fantastic. I know you both read them, and yeah, Nature Wants to Get Fat, just so good. They're awesome. So definitely recommend that. Yeah, just Google it. You'll figure it out. Gentlemen, again, thank you so very much for all of your work. It's never the easiest to coordinate schedules to get everybody together, and we were able to pull it off and really provide some good practical content for the listener, which I really appreciate. So thank you guys for everything you do, and thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us, Casey. Really enjoyed the conversation as always.
It was great. Super fun. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.